Let's bring in Scott MacFarlane and Nancy Cordes. Scott, of course, is CBS News congressional correspondent here with me at the desk, and Nancy is CBS News chief White House correspondent coming to us from the North Lawn. Scott, I want to start with you and this funding bill set to expire by Friday. Nothing inspires Congress like a deadline. Are they going to meet it? What are the latest hang-ups?
There's no expectation of a shutdown, at least not yet. There's also no piece of paper circulating with an exact top-line number or details of how to avert a government shutdown. But this is becoming a holiday tradition and a pretty awful one. Congress uses those deadlines to exact some concessions, exact some leverage over people who don't want to vote for things otherwise. So we'll see that deadline of Friday likely kicked, maybe even closer to Christmas. The top Republican on the committee that has oversight of this told me this might be a Christmas Eve thing, so keep that in play. But this is the type of thing we've seen in holidays past, but I'll add the asterisk, as you and Nancy recall. It was Christmas 2018 in which the threat of a shutdown was, in fact, a shutdown. And the Congress that began January 3rd, 2019 began in a shutdown, so it's not out of the question.
Yeah, I mean, do you think that we'll get to that point? Republicans are saying, why don't we wait till do a short-term bill, wait till next year when we've got some leverage in the House?
It's understandable they'd want to do that because that's something they can use as a negotiating tool. But with one-party control of the U.S. Congress, hard to see how it gets to a shutdown before January 3rd.
Okay. Nancy, I want to go to you because over the weekend we had some lawmakers talking about the latest news that happened over the weekend, which was that Kyrsten Sinema, who is the senator from Arizona, announced that she is changing her party registration to an independent. Take a listen to what some lawmakers said as a reaction.
Kyrsten Sinema is a friend of mine. We work well together. I respect her decision. She made it, and I think she gave pretty good reasons of why, and I can tell you the people of the United States are very upset. West Virginia is upset. They don't like the bickering that goes on. They want unity.
Look, I was surprised she made the change, but functionally, I don't think that change is a thing. I think we're going to continue doing the same thing that we were doing, whether she's an independent or part of the Democratic caucus, because she's going to continue to caucus with the Democrats.
It's probably a lot to do with politics back in Arizona. I think the Democrats there are not all that enthusiastic about somebody who helps sabotage some of the most important legislation that protects the interests of working families.
So, Nancy, you heard Senator Tester there saying that this doesn't fundamentally change things in the Senate. But just last week, President Biden was celebrating the idea that Warnock won in Georgia, giving a more robust majority for Democrats. How do you think Biden is going to navigate this now that Sinema has announced her intentions?
There's no question that it stings, Caitlin. Anytime a member of your party moves further away from that party apparatus, particularly in a closely divided Senate like this one. White House officials are trying to put the best face possible on this. What I've been hearing when I talk to them one-on-one is something similar to what you heard there from Senator Bernie Sanders. They say this has more to do with electoral politics back home in Arizona than it has to do with them. The fact is, they say that Kyrsten Sinema would have faced a very difficult primary in 2 years for re-election, and by becoming an independent, she sidesteps all of that. They argue that they have learned how to work with Senator Kyrsten Sinema over the past few years out of necessity. They don't expect her to side with them on everything. They expect that will continue to be a challenging relationship, but they don't believe, at least they claim, they don't believe it'll be any more challenging going forward than it has been already.
And Scott, Nancy brings up the fact that Sinema is up for re-election in 2024. A couple of those other lawmakers that you heard from, Tester is also up in 2024. Joe Manchin is up in 2024. And he told our colleague Jack Turman today on Capitol Hill that, when asked if he would switch parties, he said, I'm not making any decisions now. Who knows? You cover Capitol Hill. What kind of practical implication does this have? And is there a threat of some of these other lawmakers looking at what Sinema did and taking note?
Doesn't seem like it's going to change the political complexion of the Senate for the 118th Congress, but it really does underscore what not just Kyrsten Sinema, John Tester, and Joe Manchin face, but look at all the other uphill climbs Democrats face to keep that majority in 2024. Pennsylvania, Ohio, Wisconsin, not to mention whatever steep uphill climb Joe Manchin would need to climb again, as he's done in the past, in a state that was overwhelmingly pro-Trump in 2020. All that being said, Kyrsten Sinema has chosen a way, or plotted a way, to try to thread a needle. Jon Tester, Joe Manchin will have to find their own path, but we know there are regular, if not continuing, overtures to Joe Manchin to switch parties. That he hasn't done so far is likely an indication he's not going to do so in the near future either.
That's a good point. And another reason Democrats are glad that Warnock won that Senate race in Georgia. Nancy, I want to switch topics a little bit because the other big news, of course, is kind of the fallout from that prisoner swap with Brittany Griner and the idea that Paul Whelan is still in Russia. Has there been any movement or any answers about what the administration is trying to do to secure his release?
Well, the administration certainly wants to make it clear that they are working on that, even if there haven't been any breakthroughs of note. Administration officials held a meeting today to discuss the next steps in their efforts to get Paul Whelan released. It's complicated by the fact that they don't appear to have any Russian in U.S. custody that the Russians are eager to get back, so eager that they'd be willing to trade another American in Russian custody. So today in the White House briefing room, I asked the National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan, about that and about the fact that the State Department said today that they're going to try to be creative when it comes to figuring out ways to broker Whelan's release. I asked him what they mean by creative. Here's his response.
We have various ways that we are working through solutions, and we will be endeavoring on a daily basis from the president on down to finally develop a formula that works.
I asked him if he's implying that perhaps if the U.S. doesn't have a prisoner that Russia wants, if there's some kind of policy change that the U.S. might be willing to make in exchange for getting Whelan back, lifting sanctions, for example. He said if you're talking about any policy change having to do with Ukraine, the answer is no. The U.S. is not going to do that. But the universe of options here is not tremendously large. And so we're going to continue to watch this. The administration says it is in regular contact with the Whelan family. The Whelan family confirms that. But as far as concrete next steps that we can report, we're still waiting and watching.
And Nancy, former President Trump said over the weekend that he turned down an offer to release Whelan. What more do we know about that? I know some former administration officials have weighed in.
Right. This was very interesting because you have heard criticism and concern from chiefly from Republicans, but even from Democrats about the fact that this was, in their view, a lopsided exchange. You had Brittany Griner, who was found with a trace amount of cannabis oil in her luggage. She was exchanged for Victor Bout, who was a notorious arms dealer who was in the middle of serving a 25-year prison sentence in the U.S. for conspiring to kill Americans. They say that is a lopsided deal, and it incentivizes Russia and other bad actors into taking more Americans hostage for the very same reason. Then you had the former president chiming in over the weekend in a post on social media saying that he had the opportunity to trade Paul Whelan for Victor Bout, this arms dealer, and he decided against it because Bout was responsible for killing so many people. Then we got some pushback from Fiona Hill, who, as you know, is a Russia expert. She served in President Trump's administration. She was on Face the Nation. She said, actually, the reason that a deal like that never happened was because the former president wasn't all that interested in Paul Whelan's case. And so in a bit of a back and forth between the former president and some of his aides who say that's not exactly the way that it went.
All right, a lot to monitor on these developments moving forward. Scott MacFarlane here at the desk and Nancy Cordes on the North Lawn. Thank you so much.